What's up YouTube, Zero here, and today I have an absolutely amazing Snorlax EX, Delcatty and Comfey deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build that you can see on the left hand side of the screen. I'll talk about each of these cards individually, and I'll talk about why this deck is so amazing and you should absolutely be checking it out. Before I get into it, I do want to say if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Without further ado, let's talk about this deck. The star of this deck is Snorlax EX. This deck is going to live and die by Snorlax EX and getting Snorlax EX charged and ready to go. So let's talk about Snorlax EX. Snorlax EX has two different aspects to the card. The first is going to be an ability, Full Mouth Manner. At the end of your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, heal 20 damage from it. So if Snorlax is in the active spot and it does have damage on it, at the end of your turn, notice that's at the end of your turn, not both turns. At the end of your turn, you get to heal 20 damage. So that's not too bad. Then Snorlax has a move. Of course, it is a little bit of a grind to get and fully complete all of the energy required for Flop Down Punch. For 4 colorless energy, Snorlax deals 130 damage. However, it does put itself asleep. Now that's something worthy of noting, and which is why Snorlax EX pairs insanely well with Comfey, and that's why I have Comfey in this deck. Snorlax EX is going to be found in the EV Growth packs, but let's talk about the other Pokemon in this deck that pairs really well with Snorlax EX, and that's Comfey. So you're not going to be attacking with Comfey too much. However, if you do, it requires 2 energy, 1 Psychic, 1 colorless. I am running Psychic in this deck just in case I have to attack with Comfey. But for those 2 energy, you're going to have Spinning Attack for 30 damage. That's not why Comfey is in this deck, however. Comfey is in this deck for its ability Flower Shield. Each of your Pokemon that has any Psychic energy attached recovers from all special conditions and can't be affected by any special condition. Now that makes Snorlax EX very interesting. Of course, this deck runs Psychic Energy, so Snorlax is going to have Psychic Energy attached to it. On top of that, because of Comfey, Snorlax cannot be affected by any special conditions. This means that after Snorlax EX utilizes Flop Down Punch for 130 damage, if Comfey is on the playing field, Snorlax will not put itself to sleep. So that's pretty awesome, is that you're going to be able to utilize Flop Down Punch, and you're not going to put yourself to sleep thanks to Comfey. So that's going to be really nice to have on the playing field, is going to be Comfey. And Comfey is going to be found in the Celestial Guardian Solgaleo packs. Now I mentioned earlier that 4 energy, and this just isn't even on Snorlax, but in general, 4 energy is a lot to build up on a Pokemon. Typically, when a Pokemon requires 4 energy, you're going to have to find a way to turbocharge energy buildup on that Pokemon. And that's where, in this deck, Delcatty comes into play. So Delcatty, for 1 colorless energy, we're running Psychic, so the energy doesn't matter for Delcatty, has Energy Assist. So Energy Assist deals 30 damage, but you also take a colorless energy from your Energy Zone and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon. So get Delcatty in the active spot as quickly as possible. You'll be dealing 30 damage, but you'll also be able to build up energy on your Snorlax on the bench. And you can see in this video right now that I have 2 Psychic Energy and 2 colorless energy on my Snorlax ready to attack. So the strategy of this deck is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Get Delcatty into that active spot as quickly as possible, have Snorlax EX and Comfey on the bench, deal damage with Delcatty, even though that doesn't matter, you're going to be dealing 30 damage, but more importantly, you're building up the energy on Snorlax. Once Snorlax EX is ready, get it into that active spot. Of course, I already mentioned Comfey on the bench, and just attack for 130. That's how you're going to win. There's only one strategy with this deck, but it is a really cool and really fun strategy to implement. Especially once you get your Snorlax rolling, it's going to be extremely hard to stop because it does heal up for 20 HP at the end of your turn. Of course, with Delcatty, you also need Skitty because Skitty evolves into Delcatty, and Skitty is going to be found in the Celestial Guardians packs, same with Delcatty. But now let's talk about the survivability of Snorlax and how to implement this deck and get your strategy rolling. First, I'm going to talk about Pokemon communication. I've seen variations of this deck online, and a lot of them don't have Pokemon communication. Pokemon communication is critical for this deck. As I mentioned, it has a pretty specific strategy. Delcatty in the active slot, building up your colorless energy on Snorlax, Comfey on the bench, making sure that when Snorlax is attacking, it's not putting itself to sleep. And of course, you need Snorlax on the bench at first to build up the energy on it, and then eventually in the active slot. So having 2 Snorlax, 2 Skitties, 2 Delcattys, and 2 Comfeys, it's going to be important to draw the right Pokemon. There are going to be times where you draw a Pokemon that you don't necessarily need. You have 4 Pokemon on the field that you need at any given moment. And so that's Skitty evolved into Delcatty. So that's 2, your Snorlax EX, and your Comfey. That means there are going to be some cards that you draw, Pokemon cards that you draw that you may not necessarily need in that moment. So if you have a Pokemon communication, you can choose to sacrifice those cards into your deck to draw a random card. This is going to give you a better opportunity to perhaps get the cards you need. Perhaps you have a Delcatty in the active spot, you have a Snorlax on the bench, and you've been building up energy on it, and you want that Comfey on the playing field for when your Snorlax is attacking. You can utilize Pokemon communication on any Pokemon that's not Comfey in your hand, sacrifice it to choose a random card from your deck, hopefully drawing that Comfey that you need. So Pokemon communication is going to be pretty important in this deck. And for those of you who don't know Pokemon communication, you choose a Pokemon in your hand and you switch it with a random Pokemon in your deck. Pokemon communication is going to be found in the Space-Time Smackdown Dialga packs. Next, you want to keep Snorlax alive. So I have 2 leftovers. Leftover at the end of each of your turn, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, heal 10 damage from that Pokemon. So that means you're going to be healing up 30 at the end of your turn if Snorlax is in that active slot. So that's pretty nice. To increase the survivability of Snorlax, it does have 160 HP. You utilize leftovers on it, you're going to be healing up for 30 each time. Leftovers is going to be found in the Eevee Grove packs. Now I have a couple of basics in this deck. Pokeball, I have 2 Pokeballs. You draw a random basic Pokemon from your deck to your hand. And I also have Professor's Research. You draw 2 cards. This is so I can get the cards I need in my hand as quickly as possible. Next, I have 1 of each of these, so just take note. I have 1 Ilima, 1 Cyrus, 1 Sabrina, and 1 Pokemon Center Lady. Now, in some of these clips, you may see a Mars or a different supporter trainer. I did experiment a little bit, but these are the 4 that I found work really well with this deck. First, let's talk about Ilima. What Ilima gets to do is you put 1 of your colorless Pokemon that has damage on it into your hand. So in this case, it can be Snorlax EX or it can be Delcatty. Now, if you've been playing the game for a while, you already know that at the beginning of each match, you automatically get to draw a basic Pokemon. There is a possibility with this deck, considering we have Skitty ×2, Comfey ×2, and Snorlax ×2, that we draw a Snorlax to start with no other basic Pokemon. This means we're going to have to put Snorlax in that active slot to take some damage for us. Unfortunately, to start with Snorlax in the active slot is probably one of the worst starts you can get, because one, it requires 4 energy to attack, and without any other means apart from Delcatty to build up energy on Snorlax, that's going to take a while. And on top of that, Snorlax EX is 4 energy to retreat. So now it's going to be insanely hard to either start attacking or get Snorlax out of that active slot. Because of this, what I like to do with Ilima is if I do start with Snorlax, I can put Snorlax in that active slot. I won't worry about building up energy on that Snorlax in the active slot. The hope is that it can wall for me a little bit while I'm building up energy on perhaps the second Snorlax that I got, or at least as I'm drawing cards through the deck to get the strategy I want, to get my Comfey, to get my Delcatty, to get my Skitty, to get my other Snorlax, etc. So while that first Snorlax that you draw is walling, you can build up the cards in your hand that you need. Then, when it's all said and done and you're ready to implement your strategy, Ilima is there to draw back the Snorlax that did take a lot of the damage into your hand, so you don't have to sacrifice 2 points. So that is an absolutely amazing way to get your Snorlax out of the active slot, to kind of wall your opponent while you're building up your strategy. So I absolutely love Ilima in this deck. And Ilima is going to be found in the Celestial Guardians Lunala packs. Next, Pokemon Center Lady. Pokemon Center Lady, you heal 30 damage from one of your Pokemon and it recovers from all special conditions. This is pretty obvious. You have Snorlax in the active slot, you get to heal for 30 HP, and if you don't have a Comfey on the playing field, or if your Comfeys were taken out for whatever reason, you can heal up your Snorlax from 1 sleep utilizing Pokemon Center Lady. So that's going to be pretty nice to have as a part of this deck, and that's going to be found in the Shining Revelry packs. Next, 2 of my favorite cards. Sometimes you're going to have to utilize these cards. Sabrina, you switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. This is going to do a lot. It can change up your opponent's strategy. It can really mess with them. If they have a Pokemon on the bench that has a high retreat cost, it might force that Pokemon into the active slot, making it so your opponent has to figure out how to retreat them. It could force a Pokemon into that active slot that you want to attack. Of course, your opponent does get to choose the new Pokemon based off of the Pokemon on their bench, or you could get a Pokemon out of that active slot that has a Pokemon tool on it that you don't want to deal with. So Sabrina does have a lot of uses. Sabrina is not going away anytime soon, and it is one of my favorite cards. Sabrina can be found in the Genetic Apex Charizard packs. And last but not least, Cyrus. Cyrus, you switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage on it to the active spot. I already mentioned that you're going to be attacking with Delcatty as the main strategy, building up energy on Snorlax EX on the bench. Delcatty is only dealing 30 damage. That's going to give your opponent a lot of opportunities to retreat damaged Pokemon. On top of that, while Snorlax does deal a lot of damage in 130, there are a lot of powerful EX Pokemon that are not one-hit KO'd by 130 damage. This is also going to allow your opponent to retreat damaged Pokemon in the hopes of saving them. That's where Cyrus is going to come into play. It's going to take that Pokemon that has damage on it, move it to the active slot so you can finish that Pokemon off. So Cyrus is absolutely needed for this deck, and is needed for a lot of decks, especially decks that you're not going to be one-hit KOing a lot of Pokemon. And Cyrus is going to be found in the Space Time Smackdown Palkia packs. So that's the deck, and I've mentioned the strategy. It's pretty straightforward, but it's absolutely phenomenal. Get Delcatty in that active slot as quickly as possible, deal 30 damage, but more importantly, get that energy assist going onto your Snorlax on the bench. Once Snorlax is ready, get Snorlax into that active slot. Hopefully you already have a Comfey on the bench. Start attacking for 130 with Snorlax, preventing the sleep because of Comfey. A couple of supporter cards to help out: your Ilima to draw back a Snorlax that's damaged, a Cyrus to prevent your opponent from retreating any damaged Pokemon, a Sabrina to really mess with your opponent's strategy, Pokemon Center Lady to keep your Pokemon alive. On top of that, leftovers to keep your Pokemon alive as well. Pokemon communication is going to be crucial to drawing those cards in your deck that you need when you need them. Of course, you want to get those Pokemon, all three that I mentioned, out onto the playing field as quickly as possible, because you're going to want to implement this strategy. I love this deck. I love Snorlax. Of course, Snorlax is an iconic Pokemon, being around from the beginning. Of course, blocking your path in the original games, having to find the Pokemon Flute to wake it up and get it out of your path, whether you defeat it or catch it. But it was a very fun Pokemon and a great Pokemon addition to the game. It is a really iconic Pokemon in terms of the game. So I'm glad there are decks that can really make Snorlax work, and I do really enjoy this deck as well. It's not the best of decks. I do enjoy playing with it, but it's not going to be meta-shattering. And of course, with the new packs coming out, a lot of different decks are going to be made. Let me know in the comments section what you think of this deck. Have you tried something similar? And if you have, what are some of the changes you'd make? Of course, you may see in some of the clips that I utilized Mars in some of the games, but I found that these support cards work a little bit better than Mars did. Let me know what other Pokemon you'd like to see decks of. Let me know in the comments section. If there's a certain Pokemon you'd like to see a deck made of, then let me know and I'll get it done. No matter what Pokemon it is, just let me know and I'll try to build a deck around it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and again, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon TCG content. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and until next time, peace.